Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of Masculine Mastery, the show where we talk about things that matter to men. I'm your host, Dr. Ratif, and with me today I've got Don Murray, who works in pharmaceuticals as well as supply chain and business transformation, and talking about things that have affected him personally as well as wider issues with the family court system in the UK. Don, welcome.
You're welcome, thanks. Yeah, it is Don Marshall, actually.
Sorry, I do apologise. Right.
I've been called a lot worse in my time, so don't worry.
Right, I've got a lot of guest lists, and it's I must have mixed that up. But apologies, Don. How was the intro? And what do you do? What's your role, and how did you get to the stage now where you are? Because I know you're living in Scotland. You're living in sunny Perthshire. Is that right?
Yeah, I live just outside Perth. Well, I'm originally from Scotland. My dad was in the military, so I lived around. When I was 19, I went abroad, lived in France, lived in Germany, learned a few languages. But I ended up, my career was built in England, worked in retail for B&Q, worked for IKEA, ended up in e-commerce, doing e-commerce for likes of Dunelm Mill and Wolseley, which was Plum Centre Part Centre. And then in 2018, I had 6 heart attacks and a triple bypass, which is another thing that affects men, obviously. But after that, I decided I wanted to change and looked for a different job. And a job came up back in Scotland, near where I was from. And so in 2018, everything just fell into place, and I moved to Scotland. And the pace of life is a lot better. It's a lot different. I love the mountains. I love my motorbike. So for me, there's a lot of things just all kind of fit together. So I really kind of enjoy life up here as well. My wife, you can see in the background, and our daughter, were really happy to come here as well, and they feel very much at home here too.
Great. They have this conception that it's grim up north.
Yeah.
I'm from Sheffield, live in Stirling, so I couldn't agree less with that. It's
exactly.
Actually, it's sunnier up north. It's better weather. It's better water. It's better people, and yeah. And I was going to say, so now you live in Scotland and you kind of moved with your family. So your last couple of LinkedIn posts regarding your 16-year-old son, who's now, I'm assuming, starting college this week.
He's doing his A-levels now, yeah. So
great. And they went viral on LinkedIn. So they got huge amounts of publicity, thousands of likes, 500,000 views, lots of comments, and I'm assuming, dozens, if not hundreds, of direct messages, of which was me, at least a couple of times.
Yeah.
So take it back. I know I got some of the stories from the message, from the post, but obviously behind every post, behind every picture, there's always a deeper, more profound story. So if you don't mind, not into the nitty-gritty, but just how things ended, and then your journey to separation and custody, and some of your kind of outcomes with the family court system.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have to be careful what I say publicly, because you can't, you have to be careful on these things. Let's say it was a very difficult marriage, and it was with a high conflict person, and I suffered quite badly for that. And I would say there was abuse in the marriage, and that's why I left. And it did take me a number of years to get to terms with that, understand it, and actually leave the marriage. And so after I left, I moved to Coventry, and it was only an hour or so away from my son, and we kind of had shared custody, and he would come every second weekend, and that worked kind of fine, and I used to see him on a Wednesday. But when I moved to Scotland, things kind of changed slightly. The issue that my ex seemed to have is with my current wife, and this kind of got a bit worse. And they were just looking for reasons for him not to come to stay with us for the holidays and things like that for a long term. It wasn't a problem before, but it seemed to get worse. And then there was excuses that he can't come. I have to go and visit him, and then COVID hit. So then COVID was a really good reason for that. So he wasn't able to come the whole of COVID, which through that whole lockdown, not lockdown, there could have been times he could have come. But anyway, I played with it. I wanted to see him, so I didn't want to argue. And then the last year or so, he was doing his GCSEs, and then it was a blanket, no, he's not coming to you because he has to study every minute of his holiday, and you won't make him study, and his results will suffer. And so he wasn't able to come. So basically, since 2019, in the summer, he came in the summer for a couple of weeks, and then he came at Christmas, that 2019 Christmas. And then after that, he hasn't been for the full 3 years since then, which has been pretty difficult, a drain on me financially, having to go down and visit him every time, and just various reasons for doing that. Within that also, his phone would get confiscated and disappear. So hard to get in touch with him. I didn't have the home number because that was changed, because obviously, we don't communicate very well. So my ex, being a high conflict person, I only communicate on email. But eventually my son and I found a way. We used Discord to be able to chat. And so that was the main thing. We were able to chat on that as well. But not having his phone, not having that, it makes it difficult to communicate at times as well. So lots of barriers, and goalposts moving every time. So when I was down visiting, it would be, yeah, but you can't take him to your wife's family's house. You have to stay in the town here, or you can't take him in your car. Just lots of things. It was really, really difficult at times. And then so my first post, which is one you may not have seen, but it's pinned to the start of my profile, was just after Christmas. So New Year. I took my son back.
It's in one of the restaurant, isn't there? It's in the restaurant you're hugging him, I believe.
Yeah, no, there was one before that. It's one before that. That's the more recent one, and that got over 500,000. Now I did one in January, and that reached almost 1.2 million.
He's hugging you, I believe.
We were standing hugging. Yeah, standing hugging. Yes, yeah, that one. Yeah, you've seen it. And so that one there, I talked about the fact that I was taking him back, and I didn't know when I was going to see him, because he wasn't allowed to come to me in the February. We didn't know whether there's going to be more lockdowns or anything with COVID. Things were changing still. And so when would I be able to see him? When would he be allowed? And I knew that he wouldn't be able to come to mine. And I made, I kind of just, it really got to me that point when I dropped him off, not knowing, whether I was going to see him, and the communication being difficult. I put that post out, and it went crazy. And there was so many messages, so many comments, and so many men coming out to say that they'd been through the same situation. And then I did a similar post again after. So what the good thing about that post is that my ex likes to follow me on various social media platforms, and I'd posted copies of it on others. She follows me with fake accounts, but she sees these messages. So what it meant was that she actually relented, and he said he wanted to come and see me, and there was a discussion, and she promised him that he could come at the end of his exams and have a good 3 weeks or so with me in the summer, which I still wasn't sure that would ever happen. So I had to tread carefully. And what I didn't want to do, a lot of people have said, why didn't you take legal action? Because it was a fragile relationship, and he had his exams coming up, and any kind of conflict in that situation would have affected him, and I didn't want his exams and his concentration on that. So me and him came to an understanding. Look, he'll sit it out, and we'll just plan for that summer that we had. So that's what happened then. And I think me posting about it and actually being not being too scathing, but being honest about how I felt about the situation, it resonated with a lot of people, but I think it also impacted the situation to some way, and she relented to a bit. So roll on. I saw him for a couple of days, a couple of hours at Easter time, and then it comes on, he did his exams, and then once his holiday was out the way, he did come to me. I came down, I saw him on his birthday, which is the first time in a few years I've been able to see him actually on his birthday. I then brought him back to Scotland, and we had 3 magical weeks with him here in this room. This is his room, my office when he's not here. Having him here was just amazing. We've always been close, and we've always bonded, and we've always done stuff outdoors. but we climbed mountains, we camped at 2,800 feet, we camped by a loch, we swam in the loch, we kayaked, one day we did 3 mountains in a day, and just made memories, really. And the second post was when I took him back, because taking him back after that experience was actually really, really tough. Going back to having him with me for that time, which was great, and just not knowing, okay, what's going to happen next. His laptop that he took was going to be taken off him, because my ex-wife does have OCD and germophobia, so she doesn't like things coming from outside inside. So I knew that his laptop was going to be taken off him. I didn't know how long, and that was our only method of communication. And he didn't have his phone. And so that was another hard bit, because I didn't know how, when I was going to talk to him, when I was going to see him next. I think October is when I knew I would, but still a couple of months. So the whole thing, hit me hard. And I posted about it. And again, this post didn't get the views of the other one. So it was 560,000 it's had so far, which is pretty decent. What shocked me about it was that there was a lot of engagement, a lot of people commenting, a lot of people saying in the same situation. But more than the other one, the direct messages I had from guys was far more. There was hundreds and hundreds of them, because I did say in them, look, if you want to talk, if you want to, come to me, I'll happily talk, because I'm a trained coach and life coach, and I'm doing counselling skills, and so I'm happy to talk and support people. And there was just so many people, and the stories that people came up with, and not just in the UK. These are people all over the world. There was also women came forward. We've had a similar situation, where they've had access restricted or not been able to communicate properly. And people in far worse situations than me, not seen their children for years. Some didn't see them for 16 years, but then managed to, stories of encouragement as well. Whereas some of the people were able to say that they got through it, and then they've repaired that relationship. So it was quite moving, actually. And that's what got me the most.
It resonated not with me personally, but certainly with people I've coached. So in your case, I do mindset coaching. I'm not a trained counselor or therapist, although I've got a certificate as well as a diploma in life coaching, and I'm a medical doctor by training.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of kind of soft touch sessions which focus on mindset and kind of resilience training.
Mm-hmm.
That stems from my executive kind of leadership work that I do at EY. But when this post came about, Don, just the outpouring of grief, emotions, it certainly seemed to be very cathartic. And I do a lot of work mainly with men who have gone through similar things, usually divorce or separation, that they can get over. Because it's happened, in the first 6 months you get married, you kind of separate.
Yes.
But what really affects men is when they've been in a marriage for a few years, and from that marriage, they've got 1 or 2 or 3 children even. And yes, if it's amicable, there's no parental alienation, there's a good arrangement in place, whether that's Kafka's or just between the separating spouses, that's fine, you move on. But what's increasingly happening now, we've seen it in America with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, you've seen it, with Tom Brady recently, and Giselle, his ex-wife. You see a lot of, high-profile cases, Shakira and...
Yeah, definitely.
And, what's his name? Gerard Piqué. So you're seeing a lot of now custody battles playing out in the mainstream media. And what resonated, John, with a lot of men I can see, because the majority of comments were from men actually, and I'm assuming you got a lot of DMs. Majority might have been from men, because we see the Kafka's, the family court systems in the UK not recognizing parental alienation and demonization of the other parent. Now, I don't want to give statistics because I couldn't find any. I couldn't find any statistics regarding.
I don't think there is.
But there aren't. Yeah, and I did extensive research over the last week or so. I couldn't find anything. However, we do know majority of the custody just goes to the mother. So by that kind of logic, just adding 2 and 2 together, it might be worth positing that most parental alienation will affect the father more than the mother, just by the virtue of the mother having more custody of the children. So your direct messages, obviously, one was from me, just commending you because you kind of did a lot of work for me because I do get a lot of parents coming to, especially fathers coming to me, and this was very cathartic for a lot of men. And as men, we tend to be a bit more conservative in what we share online, especially when it comes to feelings. But I know you've got a nice, pinned post on your LinkedIn, which are very powerful and getting huge amounts of engagement. So that clearly shows there is a huge resonance with a lot of men. So in terms of the messages you got done, what can you pick out a few that really hit home?
There's some people going through custody battles at the moment, and there's an overwhelming. You touched on it just a second ago. There's an overwhelming feeling that the court system and the whole system is against the father. There's a father that was talking to me who is trying to file. The partner has moved away, moved the children, didn't tell him to change school. He just happened to see a post on the parent thing on his school saying cheerio to bye to one of his children, and so that's how he found out. And then he doesn't have an address, doesn't have anything, and all his calls, all his emails, everything from him and his solicitor have been ignored. So you've got someone in that situation, and they've all gone to court, but it's taking forever to get even just a right for custody or for access to get put in. And that struck with me because a long time ago, in 2011, I also did something that went to court in the marriage, and I was pretty much laughed at as a man. That's pretty much what happened. Without going into too much detail, I went to court to try and get things sorted out on my side, and it took me another four years to get out of that marriage because the court let me down. I had nowhere to turn to. So it's not just about that. It's when it comes to situations of any male, so domestic abuse against male or male violence against male, it's not taken seriously in the same way. I know you've done some podcasts on that, so it's all in the same vein. And I think the things are linked in the ways that if you're in a high conflict marriage and there is sometimes abuse or violence involved and there's issues there, then when the separation comes, then it comes into the parental alienation quite often. I don't know how big that link is, but I would say that a lot of the parental alienation will have that, and it works on both sides. So some of the other messages that came to me were from some women who'd had exactly the same situation, just saying that your story is exactly the same as mine. My husband has got custody of the children. I can't see them. These lies have been told about me as well. And that happens. That happens on both ways. So that was one of the things. It does happen both ways, and I have to acknowledge that. But my situation, what we're talking about, is what happens to men. And the women usually get the custody. The children stay with the mother. Now, if you're good enough to you may get joint custody, and there are rare occasions. I know a guy who's actually a friend of mine who has custody of his children, but the alienation is even stronger in that situation because there's been accusations of abuse towards the mother. There's been accusations of abuse towards her elder son. There's been accusations of so many things, and it's all gone through court. Yet there's no evidence, but it's still been taken through court. This is what I don't get. The evidence is all circumstantial, but they still go. But if a man did the other way around, I don't think it would even get heard of. There would be no court case to answer. And so, for me, there's just an imbalance in a lot of things.
And the people that suffer the most are children. They get dragged through this court process. Yeah. They become almost emotional, emotional weapons. They become like pawns in these two opposing parties. And amicable separations can happen. Amicable divorces can happen. Out of court settlements. I see a lot of men now who have contacted me who have churned out and absolutely hemorrhaged tens of thousands of pounds on barrister and solicitor fees, having to work 2 or 3 jobs just to pay for that, and on top of that, child maintenance as well, and still not have any custody. And even when they do, even when they will eventually see their children after this protracted court, 2 or 3 years, alienation could be a real thing whereby the child has been psychologically filled with lies from the other parent about the parent who they've not seen, and that other parent is then demonized, vilified, and the child then, as a young child, he's still developing. They might then feel guilty for actually seeing that parent who's not seen them, because they don't want to upset the first parent.
Yes.
So how would you describe parental alienation? Because WHO took it away 2 years ago as a condition.
Yes.
The syndrome was first coined in the 80s, parental alienation syndrome, by a clinical psychologist, Dr. Garner, I believe, in the 80s. It's been taken away now as from the medical psychiatric definitions, and there's no kind of case against it in the courts, except for in Brazil and Mexico, I believe. So how would you define it in a nutshell?
I mean, it's basically one parent, and you use the word demonize. They actually they basically convince their children that the other parent is not good, and generally through lies. So basically, they fabricate stories, they fabricate information, or blow things out of proportion to make the other parent look bad, and try and convince the children that they don't want to spend time with that other parent because that other parent's not good for them. And that's pretty much how it is. So to define it, it's one parent turning the children against the other parent. I think that's a simple definition. So whether they want to come up with another name, you're alienating that other parent against the children. And that's simply what they're doing. And there's a lot of pressure put on that child. So one of the things I haven't posted about as yet, and I'm working out the way of doing it, is I also have an elder daughter. So my son has an elder sister, and she's in her early 20s. She's been away to university and back with her mother. She hasn't spoken to me for 6 years in any meaningful way, apart from asking for something, or if I didn't pay, the money didn't come through on time, or things like that. So, and actually quite abusive at times, some of the way that she spoke to me, and things that I've had in the past from the other party involved. And this is purely about what was fed to her when my relationship with my new wife, my current wife, was discovered about my wife. So her in the early days, she said, as long as you're with that woman, I don't want anything to do with you. And that's how it all started. So she'll say it's not me, but it's about me and my relationship, and that's how that. So that is a pure fabric. I mean, none of it, whatever has been told, it's not true. She never met the woman, so how does she know what she's like? So it's really, and there were some things that are not very nice involved in those conversations as well, which we won't go into. But actually, you can probably understand where I'm coming from on that. So I think that is one of. Now my son heard all this. Now, he heard all these things, but the difference was right from day one, my ex-wife did acknowledge that he needed a father figure. As a boy, he needed a father figure in his life, and she did encourage him to spend time with me. But at the same time, there was things being said. But he spent time with us in the family, like I mentioned earlier. So he knows my wife. He knows my stepdaughter, and his stepsister. He knows the family dynamics, and he sees the difference. And he made up his own mind very early on. And even those 3 years apart, he still, was able to see them when we visited, and he still was able to make his own mind. So I'm probably thankful that he has not taken on board everything that's been said. But he's always been asked these questions, these awkward questions about, is it true that this happened? And I've said, where do you get that from? And it's clear where it's come from. And it's just ridiculous. And many other children would have gone, you know what, Dad, Mum says this, I believe her, you're out, I don't want to see you. But luckily, we've managed to keep that. And I've been very honest with him. If he asks me a question, I'll tell him the truth. Always.
Plus, it's getting to the age now where he's 16, doing his A-levels, will be an adult in a couple of years' time. And,
yes.
And how do you think that will affect your relationship when he becomes a fully fledged adult with his own independence, legally binding independence? How will that affect your relationship?
I believe that we will be our relationship will grow. We'll see more of each other. At the moment, he would love to come to us for Christmas and experience the Christmas in our house, but his mum wouldn't let him. And I'm not going to push it, because I'd rather see him at least at New Year and not have an argument about not seeing him at all. So I've got to try and keep the balance. But that's the hard thing. Why I shouldn't really have to keep the balance. We agree. These are when I see him. This is when he comes to me, and that's it. But it wasn't done in court. It was done as an unofficial agreement. So,
okay. And you mentioned at the end of one of your sentences in the post, "I am not okay."
Yeah.
What did you mean by that? Can you elaborate? And what kind of range of emotions have you experienced over the last 5-10 years?
Well, what happens is that, and this is about guys and how we react, and this is about when I post these things, and you said earlier that guys don't talk about these things, they don't open up. Some of the stuff I've been through and the way that I work is that I work on authenticity, easy for me to say, and I say things how they are, and so for me to be authentic, what happens is most people will say they're okay, they'll cope, they'll deal with it. At that point, I was not okay. When I dropped him off, and I wrote this not long after I dropped him off, I was bawling my eyes out. I was screaming. I was so, I had to let it out. I was so, upset and angry that, I do it. And I'm not the sort of person who would direct it at anyone. I just did it in the car on my own. And so I wasn't okay. And especially, I think for about a week after I took him back after the summer, so when I did my second long big post, I was not myself. I was down. I was missing him. I was grieving for him, and I think that's, you touched on it as well earlier, is that you've got this constant, you get that time with them, and then you have to take them back. And then sometimes you don't know what's going to happen next. And that there's almost a grief process, especially if you had them for a longer time in the summer, which quite often has. You're dropping them off and you don't know, well, what's going to happen next, what's going to be said next. So,
especially in such a turmoil relationship where you don't know, a lot of your access to him is contingent upon your ex-partner and her mental state, or his mental state,
yes,
if it's a lady. So there's nothing set in stone. There's no system in place, because if it's an informal arrangement, out of court arrangement, where you see him for Christmas and Easter and summer, etc. Yeah. There's no, legally you've got to see him once every 2 weeks.
Exactly.
And these kind of things can be very emotionally driven. If the other partner's not feeling like he or she had an outburst hate against you, you can't see him. Then she's confiscated your daughter or your son's phone from you, and that can really. It's not just the missing him. It's the uncertainty about seeing him. Because, I saw a video saying parental alienation is worse than the child's death. Because the child's death, you won't see them again. You have actually, in your mind, got over it. In medicine, we call it the 5 stages of grief.
Yes.
So there's Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, the first is denial and the second is acceptance.
Yeah.
With alienation, you're going between two or three.
You go round and round. Yeah, you're stuck in the middle. Yeah.
Exactly. Acceptance, and then you go back to grief. And that, John, was very powerful when he said, I'm grieving, and there's grief. And that, for me, and the fact that you cried like you had physically lost him, and you had this outburst, just shows the emotional melting pot that alienation can really induce in both parents, mother and father.
And I think what resonated with my post is I said these things. I put it out there. I'm being real, because that's how people really feel. But not many will actually say it. And that's something that built my kind of LinkedIn presence about being real about things as well. And I do talk about some other issues and topics as well. And I'm, very real in that. I talk about my daughter, having a mixed race family and things like that, and how that affects. And some of those, really resonate with people, and cause, if it causes some discussion and debate, then that's good, because, there's always two sides to a story. And I know that I'm only putting my side, and people will come to me and say, well, you're just saying that might not be true. And of course it's not, but this is my truth from where I am. And I'm talking about it, which hopefully, and the reason I do it is to encourage others to talk about it. And that last post really opened a lot of people out. And you touched on it as well, the amount of guys that did come to me to say that they're financially ruined or been bankrupt or, totally broke, because of the court and legal fees to do it. I simply don't have the funds to go to court to do it. I would have to represent myself. So, and I would do that if it was necessary. And it's just almost got that bad. And then there's a change of heart, and it's got a bit better. As soon as if I threaten going to court, there's a mellowness there because, and it does kind of work. But I would do it if I needed to. Now he's 16, I'm probably not going to need to do it anymore because he can demand a bit more, and I probably will see him. But so many people, guys, have gone to court because it's the only way to get through because there is no meeting in the middle to any point. At least I've had some of that. There's been at times when things have worked well, but some people got not that at all. So they go to court, they're bankrupt, they're ruined, and still have nothing to show for it. Because even if court order is given, the other thing that I've seen and been told about many times by people is that they get ignored. So a court order gives them access every second weekend. The mother or the father, let's be fair on this, takes the children away and they're not there to be picked up. Or point blank say, no, you're not going to refuse. And if the man who's standing at the door starts shouting or anything like that, police come in, they get arrested. It happens too much. Happens too much.
It's a flawed system, and it's very... I've spoken to a lot of fathers now, and it seems very mother-centric. Mother gets custody straight away.
Yeah.
It's if there's any, it seems as though the threshold for abuse or domestic violence is much lower when it comes to men being accused than it is for women being accused. And I've talked about this previously in a previous podcast.
Yes,
anyway.
I'd agree.
The Johnny Depp case highlighted that might not necessarily be the case. We need a bit more sophistication and a bit more nuance when it comes to assessing matters. The other thing I wanted to say, Don, is your last post about your son after your lovely 3 weeks in Scotland, which I've been to the Highlands, I've been to William Wallace Monument, I've been to Strathclyde University and all these kind of areas, the Highlands, to see my brother. So it's lovely, and he had a great time there. He dropped him off, and obviously you're feeling like you're grieving. What support is available for men going through grief, depression, anxiety, secondary to parental alienation?
I don't know if what does exist. I mean, there are some men's groups. There are some men's groups for supporting men for men's issues, but there is a massive lack of funding for anything for men. To be honest, in Scotland, for example, there is there's something called AMIS, which is Abused Men in Scotland, and it gets no funding whatsoever from the government, whereas Women's Aid gets tons of government funding. It's the same in England. There's Menkind. There are some organisations, but they tend to deal more with the abuse of men's abuse or men's issues like that. But there doesn't seem to be very much dealing with parental alienation. But there has been some organisations that have come to me, and I'm going to have to be forgiven for forgetting exactly the names and that, who want me to get involved with them as well, that are trying to work in this area, trying to support and do that as men. And there was a petition at the government which someone had raised, and it only had 560 votes on it about making it a law. I did my post, and it's now at 860, so it's gone up 300 since I did the post, but it's still not enough for anything to be even discussed. And so there's little support, there's little discussion. It's kind of like swept under the carpet. But I think it's important because it does go both ways. So it's not just men that suffer from it. So women need to get behind it as well. It shouldn't be allowed no matter what. So, because like the thing that suffers is the children are the ones that get caught in the middle. It's my son that has to watch what he says to his mother or to me based on what the other person said. He's the one getting caught in the middle, and he's the one not sure what's going on exactly.
And he's growing, he's got he's got his creative plan out, and then he's going through this mixture of emotions. It's soul destroying. Hopefully, God, this experience, he'll grow up to be a resilient young man who can be balanced and can spend time equally between two parents as he grows into a young adult. You never know, he might live in Scotland.
Well, it'd be great if he comes to university in Scotland. That might be an option for him. And he did really well in his GCSEs. He got 10 GCSEs, and there were two 9s, 5 8s, a 7, and 2 6s. So those are good results for a boy. And so I appreciate Mum has helped in this in some ways. But hopefully he'll do the same. And because he got good results, he's been picked for the best school in the area. They've actually selected him for sixth form. So he's now gone to a new school. And so things have fallen into place for him at the moment. But in 2 years' time, I could see him maybe taking a year out, coming up to Scotland, and then maybe he can do university in Scotland in the future. We'll see. But what I've always said to him is my door is open for him. He has a bed here. If he wants to come here, he is more than welcome. So.
Absolutely. They say there's light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm hoping
Definitely.
to go through the worst stages of him being a young child, young teenager, now, becoming almost 16, 17, 18 soon, and he can make his own decisions in life.
Definitely.
Any closing remarks to men out there who will go through a similar thing?
Speak up. I'm going to say, don't hold it in. You've got to speak to someone. You've got to talk to people about it. Don't. You're not on your own. What this has really told me is there are so many men, so many women going through similar situations that don't think you're alone. Don't hold it in. Just look out. And if we've got Dr. Asif there, and you've got myself, the two people that you can talk to for a start. So.
Absolutely. And you're doing the right thing. You're actually speaking out. You aren't just saying it, you're doing it on LinkedIn and various platforms. So, John, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Really nice to meet you virtually after probably meeting you for the next year or so on
Definitely.
For your post. Thank you so much. And really, insightful podcast. Hopefully the audience will get value from it. Thank you. We'd love to have you on again. Have a great evening.
Great.